Hi, I'm Andrew Connell with Critical Path Training, and in this session we're going to talk about the list relationships and joins in the designing lists module. One of the things that developers have been asking for from Microsoft for a long time with SharePoint is the ability to join two lists and have some sort of referential integrity. In this version of SharePoint, in SharePoint 2010, Microsoft is introducing the capability to now do just that. Now the way this is going to happen, it's not exactly like a SharePoint join or a SQL join or a SQL relationship. Don't think that. This is a little bit more loose, or a little bit loose in some ways, a little structured in other ways. What this is that when I want to take two lists and I want to join them together, I can't just arbitrarily join two lists. What I'm going to have to do is set up a relationship using a lookup field. So I'm going to go to the list, I'm going to say create a new lookup field, and then I'm going to point to another list and pick a field from that list. Okay? So that's going to allow me to go through and associate the two lists together. When I do that, and you'll see this in the demo in just a minute, but when I do that, you'll see I have a couple options. One of the things I can set is projected fields, and we'll talk about that in just a second. I can also set up relational integrity between the two fields so that I can establish like a cascading delete, or make sure that block any kind of cascading deletes if I want to do that. Okay, so that's some of the things that I can do. I'm also going to be able to encode join the two lists together and do a select against the two lists that I've joined together and get fields from both of those lists. I'll be able to do this in Camel, and I'll also be able to do this in Link. The Link way that you'll see how to do that in the Link module. So what are projected fields? Projected fields are if I'm in a parent list, like let's say I have a parent list called company, and then I have a child list called employees. In that company list, or let's use the employees one, if I say I want to go through and pull in extra fields from the company one, those are going to be projected fields. So I can look to see somebody's name like Dan Jump inside the employees list, and I'll say they're associated with the company Microsoft. But then there's fields inside that company list that I want to pull down and I want to show inside of the employees list, like say the hometown or the headquarter location or the stock symbol. Those are projected fields. So when I set up the lookup, you'll see that after I've picked the list and then I've picked the field that I want to show in the lookup, I want to then pick, I can do a little checkbox list where I can pick different fields that I want to pull down and show in that list. Those fields are not being saved inside of the list. They're still going to reside inside that parent list. They're just shown inside of a view in the view infrastructure. So it's just a presentation vehicle. That's all it is. Okay? So how is this going to be set up? This is where you're going to go in. You're going to say, first go in and create a brand new list. And then after I create that new list, I'm then going to create a column. And in that column, I'm going to make it a lookup column. And then I'm going to say, which list do I want to pull that information from? So in this case, I'm in the employees list. I want to get information from the company's list. I want to show the title of the company. And then I have additional fields that I want to show. Those checkboxes below where it says title, stock ticker, and ID, those are my projected fields. Okay, so once I've gone through and done that, you'll see now that when I go in and create a new entry for an item inside of that employee list, where I type in Ray Ozzie, the employer, I can pick Microsoft, but I said I also want to show some additional data like the stock ticker, and you'll see that when you go to the list view, it'll show you then, for the employees list, it's showing me the list item from the employees list and the lookup column, but it's also going to show me that projected field coming from the employer list. Now let's talk a little bit about joins. So very much like how SharePoint has added the capability to have two lists have a relationship together, I can also do joins. I can do these joins using the API, I can use Camel, or I can use Link. Now the syntax, the Camel support that was added was primarily added to support Link queries, because as we'll see in the Link stuff, the Link to SharePoint generates Camel queries under the covers. Now what Microsoft has done is to support this, they've added a couple new fields to the SP query object. So for instance, we now have a join property. And that property is where we're going to go through and define, in Camel, we're going to define how we're going to join two lists together and what the foreign key like relationship is. We also are going to define what projected fields I want to project into my view from the parent list here. Now, the recommendation is you probably want to use Link to go through and to join two lists together and to pull data out instead of using Camel, because the markup's going to be a little more cumbersome and you're going to be more productive working with Link to SharePoint. So now what I'm going to do is I want to jump in and show a little demo of what a Camel-based join is going to look like. So in this demo, I'm going to show you how to go through and do a join by joining two lists together and pulling data back from two different lists in the same select statement. I'm going to show it to you in Camel and then give you a quick little preview of what it would look like if you're going to do this with Link to SharePoint, so you can see the difference in the syntax. We'll spend more time looking at Link in the Link module. So in this case here, what we have is just a simple method, or a simple console application that has I'm going to go through and execute two different queries here. So I have a Camel-based query and a Link-based query. So the Camel query, if I first go in and show you the data here, if I look at my employees list, you'll see that I have a list of a couple of employees. If I look at the projects list, I have a list here of a couple of projects. Now, the way this works is that when you look at the actual fields here, I have a lookup field between the two lists. One of them is from the projects list pointing to a primary contact, which is from the employees list. And then inside the employees list, I have here a lookup pointing back to the project to say what project this person is working on right now. Okay? So what I want to do is I want to join these two lists together, and I want to pull some data from some list and then pull some data from another list inside of my select statement, essentially. So if we look at the Camel query here, everything's going to look very much the same from what you're used to with Camel queries, except for a few extra fields. So I'm first going to go through and create a new instance of my SharePoint site collection and get a reference to the projects list. Then using the SP query object, I then have to go in and set up a join. So the first join here you can see is I'm going to go through and do a left join, and I'm going to give it an alias of what the field is, what the lookup field is it's going to do this join here, and pass in a couple different properties here. So one of these is going to say what the name of the actual join is, and then what the actual list is that I'm pulling it in from. Essentially what the two keys are, where the join is actually happening. Okay. The next thing here on the projected fields, what I'm then going to say here is I want to pull down two additional fields here. So remember I'm pulling from the projects list, but I'm saying I want to go through and pull in some data from the primary contact, and that was defined up here in this alias where I did the join between the two different lists here. So because up here in this field where I was defining what the field is I want to do the join on, this lookup field that I already created here, this primary contact field, he already has all the information inside of him to say that, oh, I'm joining myself to the employees list. And I gave it an alias of primary contact. So here I'm saying, well, go pull the title of the person, which is his name, and then also go pull the job title out from that list that I'm pulling in from. The type is always going to be lookup because I'm joining on a lookup field. The next thing I'm doing is saying, what fields do I want to pull back? Well, I want to pull the title field back from the projects list, the one that I'm actually doing the primary select on, and then I also want to pull in two additional fields, the two that I defined, projected fields that I defined. I then am going to want to go through and set up the query. What do I want to go and pull in where this is going to allow me to put some sort of a little where statement in. And then I'm just going to iterate through all of the results. So you can see here, we'll run this in just a second, but you can see here the new stuff is going through and adding the join and also the projected fields. And it can get a little challenging to kind of read this stuff, and it's not as intuitive as one may expect to go through and do traditional joins like you're used to with SQL. But as a little sneak peek here, if you take a look at what the link query looks like, and we'll get into the details of how this is going to work in another module. But you can see I'm doing my select statement on projects, and then I'm going to do my filter to say go through and grab where the person's name is Dan Jump. So just like in my Camel query, where my where clause here, I said look where their name is equal to Dan Jump. And the link query, it's a little bit easier to read here. It's a much more cleaner query. I'm then going to do a little bit of sorting, and I'm going to say go through and grab all these additional items. It's going to go through and define a new object, and give it these three fields, pulling from these different properties. You can see I'm able to just point to this primary contact field, and it automatically does the join behind the scenes for me to go grab those additional fields. So this query is still doing the exact same join and pulling the data back in a much cleaner way. And then I'm just going to write all the results out. So if I come over here and fire this query off, the first time it's going to run is with with Camel, and you'll see that I even get that internal ID property there that we have on lookup fields. But when I run it with Link, you can see here that it's a much cleaner result coming out, and it's a lot easier to read the code as well. So I think that you'll find that you'll want to use LINQ to go through and to pull your data out of SharePoint. It's going to make you more productive as a SharePoint developer, but know that you can always go back and get the camel equivalent. All right. Writing camel joins can be a bit tricky, and so one thing that you can do to make your life a little bit easier is that when you go through and when you're creating these data contexts in LINQ, you can have a log property, and you can just say spit out the actual query that's being generated. So if I ran this again, what you'll see is before the LINQ query runs, it will actually dump out, or after the LINQ query runs, it'll dump out the camel that was generated to actually pull the data back. So I could take all of this camel that you see right in here, and I could go put that in a text file and use that to pull out and write my camel query if I had to use a camel query for some reason.